This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.
Good morning, Minister. And
Morning.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to have you. And I must apologize for the technical delay at the beginning, but it's a very great pleasure to have you this morning. And indeed, I'm pleased to welcome everybody to this event, which is part of the 2024 Future Proofing Europe series, which is sponsored by the Department of Foreign Affairs. And as I mentioned, we're delighted to be joined by you, Minister Anders Adlercreutz, who will speak to us for about 20 minutes or so on Finland's priorities for the EU for the next 5 years. And that's against the background of the forthcoming enlargement of the EU, the European elections on the 6th to the 9th of June, and of course on the ongoing war in Ukraine. And then we will go to the question and answers. Just a few administrative details. As this is an online event, you will be able to join the discussion using the Q&A function on Zoom, which should be on your screen. And we would appreciate if the questioners could give us their name and affiliation. And a reminder that today's presentation and Q&A are both on the record. And please feel free to join the discussion on Twitter using the handle @IIEA. And we're also live streaming this morning's discussion. So very warm welcome to all of you joining via YouTube. May I present Minister Anders Adlercreutz, who has been Minister for European Affairs and Ownership Steering of Finland since June 2023. And he represents Finland in the EU General Affairs Council and is responsible for the country's ownership steering policy for state-owned companies. And he was first elected to Parliament in 2015, and he represents the Swedish party in Finland in the Parliament. He served as chair of the Swedish Parliamentary Group from 2019 until 2023. And Minister Adlercreutz is an architect by profession and is a partner in the architectural company in Finland. And we're aware, Minister, of your view that the long-term success of Europe is being decided now and that Europe must act now. And of course, it's a pivotal time for Europe. The European parliamentary elections are fast approaching against the background of a very challenging world. And I hope we look forward to you outlining Finland's view on the future of the EU in the next year term of the European Parliament and the key priorities that Finland has identified for the EU. So Minister, the floor is yours, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, and happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today, and of course my apologies for not being there in person. Dublin and Ireland are dear to my heart. That's a fact that not even your very scary Eurovision song could change. But having said that, I realize some might have found the Finnish song scary too, albeit for completely different reasons. But enough of that, on to the issues at hand, the challenges that the EU is facing and how Finland would like to approach them. We are living in pivotal times. In less than 4 weeks, we have elections to the European Parliament. Elections are always crucial, but this time there seems to be more at stake than in a long time. The voters know best, of course. One might say that it's not the job of politicians to tell the voters what to think, but I think it is our obligation to let voters know how we see the world and what we have learned. In many ways, it's all of our job to make sure we say what we see and help voters have a truthful and correct view of things as they head to the polls. In today's world, even this has become more challenging. Messages reach us from all kinds of platforms, and it's understandable that things can seem overwhelming at times. There are also things going on in Europe and around the world that we have very little direct control over, but that has the power to impact us greatly. Whether they're here in the US, in Asia, or anywhere else. We live in a global world. As we speak, we also have a hot war in the middle of Europe. So in that sense, when you look 5 years back and think about what the issues at hand were 5 years ago. We live in quite different times. If somebody had told us that we were seriously discussing European ammunition production capacity as a European election issue, then 5 years ago, nobody would really have believed that. So the immediate and present security threat in Europe is Russia's brutal war of aggression against Ukraine. It already led to dramatic changes in the security sphere. Apart from NATO gaining Finland and Sweden as members, it has also led to a new focus on the European defense industry. And here, of course, the reason is clear. We have to make sure Russia's aggression isn't rewarded with anything that could even look like a win. And in order to make sure we are making that happen, we need to step up the game. I mean, this is not a local conflict in the sense that it's an issue that we have to take care of here, but we also, I mean, the world order as we see it, the world order as it has been existing since the Second World War is very much at stake, and it's being challenged. And autocrats outside of Russia also look at the reaction of EU and the West in Ukraine. Finland never shut down our production of grenades and ammunition after the Cold War. Many countries did and are regretting it now. Russia won't stop in Ukraine, and that's why we have to stop Russia there and make sure they leave and pay for the mess created. The issue of security is now on the EU agenda like never before. The war may seem far away on European island, but it's very close to us here. And in order for all our countries to remain safe, we need to step up now. The countries between the EU and Russia, they are under constant threat. The issue of enlargement today is therefore very much an issue of security. Even though the EU does not have military capabilities itself, that is the responsibility of the individual countries. And most have chosen to organize their defense through NATO. The EU still provides a certain level of safety and security. I mean, being a member of the Union, it gives you a standing. It creates stability and security. The enlargement is obviously a huge issue and a process that won't be easy. We have set clear merit-based criteria for the countries wanting to join, and these need to be monitored and watched closely. The issue of the rule of law remains central here. In some ways, there is a little bit of irony there, as some countries within the Union have shown challenging behavior in this department too. And we can't very well demand more of countries wanting to join than we demand of ourselves. So the rule of law needs to be the bedrock of the European Union now and as we move forward. Apart from the issue of enlargement and security, there are other issues on the agenda as well. As we prepare for the life after the European elections, Finland has defined its goals for the upcoming Commission. So our key priorities can be summarized as one, strategic competitiveness, how Europe fares in the competition between the other global powers. Two is comprehensive security. Here, I mean, Ukraine is the most pressing issue, but also industrial capacities and to some extent, for example, immigration issues. And three, promoting a clean transition. If there's one industry that is very crucial with regards to our future, it is, I mean, everything that deals with trying to create the premises for a clean, sustainable future. The European Union has a tremendous ability to change the world in a good way. We often speak of the so-called Brussels effect. That's what happens when we in Europe, the world's greatest single market, decide to move in a certain direction. When we do it right, we can change the way the whole world acts. We are facing what some call a productivity crisis in Europe. The need for both public and private investments here is clear, and we need to make sure we create the best possible circumstances for this to happen. A few numbers were released that showed productivity in the US was up 2.6% in the fourth quarter of last year. So compared to that, how much do you think that productivity was up in the EU? So it wasn't up at all, it was actually down. It fell by 1.2%. And this is obviously not sustainable. We need action. I mean, this has been the course for all too long. And if we let that continue, I mean, we will be desperately falling behind. So the long-term competitiveness of Europe needs to be built on the EU's own strengths, on market-based solutions, and on fair competition. This means that we have to move away from subsidies that lure investments to places where they are only viable if supported by constant state aid. We need to get back to normal, as we loosened the rules first during COVID, and then because of the energy crisis that Russia's brutal attack also led to, we opened up Pandora's box, you could say. And now we sadly seem to be stuck in this situation. I said that we need to get back to normal, to a situation where we let the market decide where investments should be made, not the size of state subsidies. But with the situation in the US after the Inflation Reduction Act, one might call the current situation the new normal as well. But I would argue that that would be a grave mistake. We cannot build a sustainable economic model that is reliant and only profitable with the help of governmental interventions. So we need to focus on our strengths and invest in places where there is long-term sustainability to be had. Invest in research and development, invest in clean energy, a good grid, on an research and development infrastructure, all in all. So to create the basis for these investments to be based on. In Finland, we have built our energy infrastructure, our grid, moved away from fossil fuels in our energy mix, and are moving along to an ever greener energy palette. Any given day, the amount of fossil-based electricity in our system is countable in the single digits. And this has happened through totally market-based solutions without subsidies, by just creating the possibility for the companies to invest. And that's why we have investments in the green transition lined up for over 250 billion euros. All of these will not become reality, of course, but many will. And that is the sustainable way of doing this. Get your house in order first and bring in the investments that can benefit from the work that has been done. So there came our third priority as well, promoting a green transition. And of course, in order for this to be a possibility, it's essential that the EU sticks to its goals, that we align our 2040 goals with our 2050 commitments. But the elections will be tough. The outcome may not please all of us, but we should never lose our focus. The EU can be the key to so many good things. We need to make sure that that key opens up the right doors as well. So thank you for your attention. This is a short overview of how we in Finland view the coming challenges, what our focus is, and I'd be happy to hear your questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. That's a very good overview of a very interesting series of priorities, very forward-looking series of priorities, but the challenges as well are also very clear. And maybe just to start off with one of the main challenges, the war in Ukraine. I know that Finland, as you mentioned, you never downsized in the way that other European countries did. And of course, the proximity to Russia has a huge effect, obviously, in every way on Finland. But I know you have been critical of the response to Ukraine, which is an absolutely pivotal conflict for Europe to win. How do you feel that Europe, the EU, could, as it were, up its game, improve its contribution to winning the war in Ukraine? Is it more weapons? Is it a different kind of weaponry? Where is the lack and what needs to be done?
Yes. Well, it's many things. If I first give a little perspective on the Finnish solution, Finland has a population of 5.5 million inhabitants. We have a conscript-based military service. It's obligatory for every male. Every woman can enter if she wants to, but it's obligatory for every male. The time that you serve is 6 to 12 months, and then you enter the reserve. Our active reserve today is 270,000. Our wartime reserve can be up to 900,000. So that's a significant force, and that's of course why Finland also, Finland entering NATO is of great benefit to NATO as well. Finland has invested in what some would call traditional warfare, the one that we see in Ukraine at present. Finland has the biggest artillery in Europe, 1,400 pieces altogether. So when, for example, Denmark gave away all of its artillery, 19 pieces a few times ago, you can compare that to what Finland believes to be the size that you need for a conflict of today. We have stockpiles, we have production of our own, and that's why, of course, Finland also has been able to give fairly significant amounts to Ukraine. We recently sent our 23rd aid package. The size of that was 188 million euros. If you compare that to our size, the size of our economy, that would mean, only this 23rd would mean France giving 2 billion or Germany giving 3 billion euros of military aid. Finland's total contribution has been 2 billion euros. If you again compare that to France, it would mean France giving 20 billion euros or Germany giving 30 billion euros. We know that all countries haven't been given equal amounts. And that, in a sense, is a reflection of maybe us not really understanding what is at stake here. How grave this threat is. If all EU members had given as a share of GDP an equivalent amount to what the Nordic countries and the Baltic countries have given, Ukraine would have received 70 billion more in military aid. And that would have meant a real significant difference in what's happening now in Kharkiv, for example. So I think it has been concerning to see the differences in the European approach, and I really hope that we will now get the help going. And unfortunately, we have lost 2 years already. 2 years ago, actually 5 years ago, the government should have handed in the orders, should have ramped up their production, should have made it possible for the private companies to make the investments needed so that they can increase the capacity. In the front in Ukraine, Ukraine would need something like 8,000 artillery grenades a day, and that is significantly more than very big European powers produce in a month at this time. So we have been totally inadequately prepared for this. Well, what shall we do? We need to commit to sustainable aid. We have to have a long aid perspective. I think the European defense industrial program is a good start, but I think we also need to understand that the defense industry can't be a national industrial matter. The single market has to work here too. If you remember the first reaction to the Czech initiative of gathering 800,000 ammunition rounds globally, the first European reaction was that, can we buy from outside of the EU? Shouldn't we buy from this or that country? And that just shows that we somehow mix national short-term interests with what really is a grave European concern. Now that initiative has moved forward, I'm happy for that. But I think we also, when we talk about procurements, military procurements within Europe, when we talk about the defense industry, we have to get the market working so that we don't have a situation where country A only buys stuff from country A, country B from country B, and so on. Because if we do that, we pay too much we overpay for substandard equipment, and we can't afford that. So the single market has to be working. We have long perspective. We have to have commitments from all EU member countries, because the alternative is just not a possible nor a sustainable outcome for the EU.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive reply. And indeed, I think, as you know, Ireland has been pressing for a number of years for completion of the single market, and the single market in industrial armament production and now needs to be. Just as a follow-up, I have a question, Minister, as a follow-up to that, and it's from within the Institute, saying that Ireland and Finland have been like-minded in their security and defence policy, and since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Finland, of course, has joined NATO. The question really, rather plaintive question, is there a role for neutral countries now in the EU?
Well, I mean, I understand the situation in Ireland is totally different compared to Finland, and our geographic location is different. In an ideal world, I would hope that there would be a place for neutral grounds. But I mean, we really see NATO as the European defense solution, and of course, the stronger NATO is, the better I think it is for Europe. That just as a general thought. I think, I mean, in Finland, we had a very stable position until until the beginning of 22. Only some 20 or 30% of the population favored NATO membership. And then suddenly we noticed the increased activities along the border that started along the border to Ukraine. That got people thinking, and after the invasion, I mean, the support immediately went over 50%, and now it's constantly at 80%. And people in Finland are really happy about the membership. I mean, Finland is, in a way, you could say, a very pragmatic country. So when the situation changes, when the premises change, when we get a new understanding of what Russia is capable of, we change our position in this matter that really was a foundation of our foreign policy for the post-war, the whole post-war era. But now we are a member and happy with that, and very happy that also Sweden got in a few months ago. I think that's essential also for the stability of the Baltic area, and I think that both Sweden and Finland are great assets and really do strengthen NATO's capabilities.
Yes. Thank you. And indeed, we pay tribute to Finnish help with the Commission of our Defence Forces, where General Esa Pulkkinen was a member of that commission, and indeed helped significantly in drafting proposals for the future development of our defence forces. I have a question from Francis Jacobs on the question of enlargement, Minister. And he says the merit-based approach regarding enlargement is constantly being challenged, not least by recent developments in North Macedonia and above all in Georgia. And how should the EU react? And why was the US, he asks, quicker to respond than the EU to yesterday's vote in Georgia? Now, I know you responded, and indeed the other neighbouring countries responded to Georgia. But Francis' question is, how should the EU react to the situation that's developing in Georgia, but also in some of the other prospective member states?
Yeah. I think you can say that for quite a few years, I mean, the EU wasn't really a driving force behind enlargement, and I can understand some frustration among some Western Balkan countries. But I think now the process is going, and I think it's paramount that we stick to the merit-based approach. And as I said in my introduction, the rule of law is paramount. We know how detrimental it can be if member states deviate from that path, meaning that, of course, we have to get our house in order, but we really have to make sure that the countries, the candidate countries, do the reforms needed so that they have stable rule of law abiding countries when they enter the EU. So we can't really lower our standards here. I think it's important that we signal to, for example, Georgia in this matter that we view this development as serious, that it doesn't help Georgia on its European path, that we expect Georgia, as we expect, our own member countries to fulfill, the demands that we set on them. Then, of course, this will be a long process. I think there will be steps forward and steps backwards, and we of course know that our own structures at present also allows for one member out of 27 to really slow the things down. So of course there are challenges, but it's really clear that we are. It's really clear that we have to be clear on these demands and not convey even a small hint that it could be possible to enter without fulfilling, without abiding by our rules.
Yes, thank you, Minister. You mentioned the one member, obviously Hungary, and Hungary will take over the presidency of the EU on the 1st of July. I think earlier in the year you had met your counterpart in Hungary. How do you see the situation with regard to Hungarian membership with the way they are facing towards the attitude they're adopting to China, to Russia, and yet we are having the presidency with Hungary on the 1st of July. What do you feel is the likelihood that this will proceed smoothly?
Well, of course, we hope that the first intergovernmental conference could be held already in June under the Belgian presidency, and then, of course, we expect Hungary to be an honest broker during its chairmanship. So that, of course, the starting point. But we know the difficulties we had in December when trying to go forward with the enlargement process. Hungary has said that it has 44 opportunities to veto any progress. I think that is a concern. In general, I think it's concerning that there are these bilateral issues between countries that possibly will be a hindrance towards enlargement, whereas enlargement should be based on a common set of targets and goals that are set by the EU and not by one single country. But of course, we're concerned about the situation as far as the rule of law goes in Hungary, and that is reflected in the funds that have been frozen. You could say in December, at the eve of the European Council meeting, 2 pieces of legislation were put into effect in Hungary that additionally weakened. We made the situation worse. But we know, of course, that things can go in another direction also. I'm really happy to see the work being done in Poland at present. It's difficult to rebuild structures that have been to some extent been dismantled. But we've been happy to see the progress made, and Poland has been presenting the progress in a few General Affairs Council meetings already. But I think it's, I think the lesson learned here is that whenever there is even small hints of the progress going in the wrong direction, it's important that Europe reacts, that EU reacts, and takes note and doesn't allow for a slippery slope situation that we now at present are very much trying to somehow counteract and repair.
Thank you. Yes, so we're hoping things will improve. I have a question, Minister, from Tara Kuczek from the Institute. Ireland, along with Germany and Poland, is part of the extended Nordic Baltic 8 group. And it's an important partnership group for Ireland. How do you see that partnership evolving? What role can Ireland play in the Nordic Baltic 8? And perhaps I could ally that with a question with regard to interest that has recently shifted to the Arctic and the resources it possesses. What is the significance of the so-called Arctic resource race for Finland and other Nordic countries?
Well, I think the whole Arctic region will be a bigger focus of Europe. I mean, we hope Finland has long been a proponent of the EU really focusing more on that area. We know that China is focusing. We know that Russia is focusing. We know the discussions that are constant as to where the borders are and who owns what areas. There are natural resources. But there are also sustainability issues. The Arctic region is very vulnerable. It's not possible to exploit it in the way that it might have been possible to do in other areas. So there are very big environmental concerns also. And then, of course, we know that climate change is an issue. It, of course, you could say will change the Arctic, but also because of that, it is essential that we together stick to our goals and do all we can to keep it below 1.5 degrees in total. So I think lots of things play into the picture, but in general, I think the bigger coalition we can build around looking after these things, whether it's just the Baltic area or the more Arctic region up north, the happier we are, of course, because it should really be viewed as a common interest.
Yes, and a positive grouping is the Nordic Baltic 8, I think, and hopefully that could be a significant block within the EU as we go forward into the next parliamentary term, and in the EU Council. It's a significant number of Northern European, and if you put in Ireland, a Western European state, has a long track record of liberal democratic values, I think. So
and as you said before, we are very much aligned on many issues.
Yes. I have questions concerning the European parliamentary election coming again from Francis Jacobs. And Francis says that in 2019 in the European parliamentary elections, climate change and the green transition were among the key issues and helped to mobilize younger voters in particular and to raise the turnout. And this year, he says, there seems to be much less emphasis on these issues and indeed backtracking among many of the political families, including the larger group, the EPP. He asks, how can younger voters be mobilized in these circumstances? And how can the minister's emphasis on the green transition again be kick-started when there seems to be greater opposition?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question and a concern of mine also. I mean, one concern, of course, is that is there a risk that the upcoming commission will not be as progressive or say ambitious in this regard, and then of course also the risk that we as politicians are not able to talk about the issues that really concern younger voters. Global issues, whether it's the threat to democracy, climate change, the fate of liberal democracies altogether, how Europe can act as a counterweight to authoritarian countries, and so on. I think those all interest younger voters, and I think it's important that we also are able to discuss them. I think it's fair to say that it's probable that the situation after the election will be such that those groups that traditionally have been talking a lot about climate change and the need for climate action, they might lose seats compared to groups that maybe do not see that as too big a goal, as a big goal, and that I think that might need to a shift. And then I think it's also important in this whole discussion to also realize, when you think about the discussion during the elections, that there will be probably hybrid actions toward Europe. I mean, there will be efforts by, for example, Russia to sow discussions around these topics, to sow climate skepticism, to try to weaken the front against Ukraine, to maybe sow a discussion around immigration that will be very polarizing within the EU. So I think it's also always worthwhile trying to realize and identify these issues. But in general, I mean, Ursula von der Leyen, she's been a big proponent of the green transition, and she has had really an ambitious stance here. And of course, I really hope that in the case that she continues, that she will set the bar high. I mean, keep it at a high position, and I'm quite confident that she aims to do that.
Thank you, Minister, for that. Before we move on to maybe the industrial strategy and strategic autonomy, I do have from Brigadier General Ahern, retired, a question about undersea cables on the maritime and the situation with regard to defending the territorial waters. And the Brigadier General says the EU's connectivity within and outside its member states via undersea cable is critical to its ongoing economic well-being. And to date, the EU has never mounted a maritime UNIFOR operation to include the territorial waters of member states. Do you believe that this would ever be a possibility, or should member states' territorial waters remain solely a national responsibility or a pooled one? It's rather quite a technical defence question, but obviously for Ireland,
I can't really say that I have.
For
I
Ireland,
can't really say that I have given that too much thought on that level, but I think it's clear that I mean there is a strategic interest in these cables, whether they are data cables or gas cables, gas pipes or whatever. And in this world, I mean, we need connectivity, we need data transfer, and our systems, of course, are reliant upon those connections functioning. We know that there has been, I mean, an interest in our cables from, of course, other powers too. So I think it's not the concern is not totally unfounded, and I think I mean I think it's good that there is a discussion on whether we are paying enough attention on them. Of course, we had an issue here. We had issues in the Baltic Sea also about cables for one reason or another being damaged. So yes, it's a valid concern. I can say that much.
Yes, and not it's just security, but also, as you mentioned, an economic concern.
Yes.
That we're particularly conscious of here. Minister, the market-based solutions you mentioned, rather than national subsidies to encourage productivity in the EU. Is there not a case for a coordinated EU offensive trade tools as well as defensive tools to protect not just the single market, but also the EU interests in the world? Is one of the questions I have.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about strategic autonomy, and I think that is a valid concern, and we need to be aware of our dependencies. I mean, the EU has to. It is a trade union. We trade with the world. We mustn't turn inwards and be protectionist. We have to do trade deals with. I mean, we have to get the Mercosur through at some point, and so on. So we are a union that trades with the rest of the world. But of course, harmful dependencies are harmful. And if we as a union are too dependent on one provider or one nation as a provider, then we are by definition sustaining vulnerabilities. So of course we should be concerned about this, and we should identify them. In Finland, there's a lot. I mean, we have lots of industries that are growing rapidly. For example, the battery industry, where a lot of technology is in Chinese hands. A lot of the minerals at present are in China's hands. I mean, that should raise some concern. Finland, coincidentally, is the only country in Europe where we have all those minerals within our borders. So that's why we are trying to develop also a battery industry, also to secure the strategic autonomy. Then, of course, if the question was relating to the subsidies, I mean, how do we react to the challenges that, for example, the Inflation Reduction Act offers? I think that's a valid concern, but I think it's also worth noting that of course, the IRA, the size of it is difficult to define at present. There is not really an upper limit, but we have, of course, also had our RRF to the amount of almost €1 billion. We'd had lots of state subsidies during COVID times and during the war. So the Europe has also used public funds to some extent for the same means. But I think we would be wiser to try to analyze how we create competitiveness in general. And I mentioned the Finnish example. The market-based actors have really transformed our energy sector. So Finland is now essentially, I mean, to a large extent, fossil-free as far as electricity production goes. And by being fossil-free, we also have the second cheapest electricity in Europe. So without state subsidies, with just having regulation that allows for the companies to invest, we have created a situation where we have the second cheapest electricity in Europe. And that in itself creates a foundation for example, the battery industry, for data centers and whatnot. So if we strengthen the single market, fix the problems that we have because we have problems, create a neutral playing ground for our actors, get the Capitals Market Union to completion, invest in research and development and some infrastructure, I think then we will not have to talk about national subsidies for these investments because the foundation will be there. And in the longer run, it's a much more sustainable way of going forward. Because if we go, for example, down the path that, I mean, some projects have been now showcasing recently, for example, Northvolt in Germany, where we let, in fact, I mean, the Americans decide the level of our subsidies by using this matching principle for the first time. I think then we are on a slippery slope that will be especially challenging for the smaller member countries.
Yes. Thank you. Just a side question, Minister, of interest. What proportion of Finnish energy comes from nuclear?
Okay, I should have the number in my head, but it's something around between roughly 30 and 40%. Yeah, a third roughly. And yes. Last year, Olkiluoto 3 went into production. It was a very long project that had quite a few challenges, but that was 1,600 megawatts. But the year before, 2,400 megawatts of new wind power was introduced into the grid. So, I mean, the amount of wind power built during 1 year was 50% bigger than the whole capacity of this new nuclear plant. So I think we are building on many levels, and a lot of wind is also being built. In that case, we in Finland, we have a certain challenge that might not be so much of an issue for you in Ireland, but we can only, at present, we can only build wind power on our western border, because on our eastern border we need to have radar surveillance for obvious reasons. So there's a small technical challenge that means that wind power is mainly focused on our western shore. But Finland is a very good country for wind power, and the fact that we have a really good grid allows for us to have parks in most areas of the country. I mean, wind power parks in most areas of the country.
Yeah, that's certainly very impressive. Just a last point on China. I mean, I think there was a very, as far as European, the EU is concerned, a very disappointing visit by Xi Jinping to Europe, where he visited France, Serbia, and Hungary. I have a last question here. Are you satisfied that Finland's plan to pivot to alternative sources of import from China is on track, and will that carry a financial cost? I think you've covered a lot of that, but is there some way still to go?
I'm not sure if I heard your answer correctly. I mean, our plan to trying to get rid of dependencies
on China, specifically.
On China. Yes, I don't think it's that much of a national plan. I think it's more a general European issue, and of course I was mentioning the battery industry that we are trying to grow here. That's just a fact that we realize that we have these minerals, and we need to build the value chains around them so that we through that can strengthen European strategic autonomy, and of course also competitiveness. But Finland in general, I mean, we are trading as before. I mean, we are not, of course, restricting trade, but as a general concern, of course, we think that it's important that we, as Europeans, as a union, are not naive but aware of possible dependencies and constantly evaluate the possible risks involved.
Yes, keep a watchful eye. Minister, to turn to an issue that all of the European member states are grappling with, and I know there have been specific issues in Finland, the issue of immigration. Mm-hmm. It's obviously high on the agenda, and a particular issue now that the European parliamentary elections are coming closer. You have had specific issues in Finland where there have been forced immigration in a sense over the border from Russia. But yes, in general, how is Finland coping with the immigration situation?
Yes, in general, I mean, immigration to Finland is I mean, the numbers are not very high. You could say that they should be higher. We have demographic challenges. We have we need a bigger workforce, for example. Now, I mean, during the last 2 years, the net immigration has been higher. I think it was 55,000 last year, so 1% of the population, which is pretty much where we think that it should be. That's, I mean, the net situation. I mean, immigration minus emigration. But then, of course, we have the specific issue of instrumentalized, I mean, hybrid actions along our border. That has been an ongoing discussion for quite some time. At present, the border against Russia is closed, which, of course, is not a good thing in the long run. I mean, we have people here that have relatives in Russia, and there is a need for some traffic, even though, I mean, the need for trade has pretty much been diminished as a result of the war, but there is still a need for humans, for people to cross the border. But we are trying to deal with the instrumentalization issue, and we are now preparing legislation that could give us some of the tools needed. But in general, I mean, we think that this is a European matter. I think on a European level, we should have a common idea of what instrumentalized migration is. I mean, the fact that Russia, for example, uses innocent people as tools in order to pressure another country. And of course, ideally, we would have a common approach, a common set of tools and rules to tackle that situation. But now at present, we are going forward with some national measures that will soon be discussed in Finland's parliament. And while we are, I mean, waiting for that, at present also the border is closed. This has been now since late last autumn.
Yes, as you say, a challenge, but Finland is supportive of the EU immigration policy that has recently been passed.
Yes.
Yeah. Just we're closing, coming to almost closing time. You had a particular view, Finland and Ireland indeed would be partners in this, on African development. I think you view that as important in the sense of EU partnership with Africa.
Yes.
In spite of all that's happening, that this should really go forward and be promoted.
Yes, and I think it's worthwhile for us understanding or noting that if the EU isn't in Africa, then China and Russia will be. So there is not a void that will not be taken by anybody, but Russia will be there and China will be there. And I think either alternative is not good for the EU, nor do I believe it's good for Africa. So of course, I mean, we really need to develop trade and have fair trade principles in order for Africa also to being able to increase their trade with Europe and through that create sustainable well-being and prosperity. But I think when I was in Dubai at the climate meeting a few months ago, I mean last autumn, and discussed trade issues with a few African countries, and for example our carbon border mechanism, it has created some concern, and of course issues like that should be marketed and explained correctly, so that it doesn't become like a trade war issue, but it becomes a climate issue where we, as long as we both adopt the same principles and standards, will be able to trade more freely and so on. So there are lots of things that easily can be misunderstood, and that has raised some concern in Africa that we of course need to be aware of. But all in all, yes, we can't afford not to have a focus on Africa, because other players are focusing on it.
Yes, and quite a very last question, Minister. You have put forward, Finland has put forward an initiative for an EU-wide preparedness strategy. And obviously the leaders have instructed the Commission to prepare that for the EU-Belgian presidency is drawing one up. Could you just briefly explain to us what that means?
Yes, of course, in Finland we have a concept that's called, if I try to translate it freely, it's the concept of like total security in a way. I mean, it's a big security concept where we see that all actors in society have their role. I mentioned our conscription-based military service before, but it's not only about military issues. It's about us, of course, having shelters in most buildings. We are prepared for crisis. We have stockpiles of many things. We have, I mean, ammunition in the case of a crisis. We have food. We have energy. The preparedness mindset is visible in the whole of our society. And it served us well during COVID. It will serve us well in the case of a crisis in the future. But I think it's this concept and this mindset that we of course think that the whole of Europe should have. I think we have now been forced to be painfully aware of how our bad preparedness as far as military production, for example, has been to the benefit of Russia, actually, and we have not been able to help Ukraine significantly enough. But it's not only a military thing; it's an approach to the whole society where everybody needs to be aware of their role, and everybody has has a role to play in both peace and peace times and in the case of a conflict.
Thank you very much. That's a very clear outline, and I think that strategy, when it's prepared, will be of help to us here in Ireland. Minister, thank you very much for your time this morning. We really appreciated it. I think we have learned a lot of the Finnish view and the way you see the EU and its policies going forward. And Ireland and Finland have been good friends, good allies, and I hope we will continue to be so. But thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. And goodbye.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you all for the good questions. I look forward to a continued good cooperation. There's lots of things that unite Ireland and Finland.
Indeed, and I hope we'll see you in person in Ireland sometime soon.
This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.